And welcome. Tonight we're going to continue exploring all of the amazing services. And I say amazing because for a little town, although, as I've always said, 28,000 of us know Milford's the center of the universe, and 6 billion people need to be educated on that, it is surprising at not only the breadth, but the depth of experience and services here. Tonight, there's a word that can trigger emotions and stereotyped reaction. So rather than preempt the jury, let's start with an introduction and let you explain what you do in the right terminology.
Absolutely. So I'm Monica Krishnan. I am one of the radiation oncologists over at the Cancer Center with Milford Hospital. And I, along with a big team of people, have started the supportive and palliative radiation oncology program over there. And what we do is we really focus on giving radiation to improve quality of life in patients with metastatic cancer, so cancer that's spread to different places in the body where it may be causing pain or other symptoms. And so we really focus on kind of improving quality of life for those patients.
I'm Patricia Doherty. I work at the Cancer Center in Milford with Dr. Krishnan and our wonderful team of physicians and therapists. And again, we serve the community, and I think we do it very well. And we've recently started a program, the Palliative program, and helping these patients, and it's going really well.
So now the word hospice, we don't want to use anymore, right?
No.
I mean, I just went through it with my father-in-law who passed away last week, and when the physician called my darling bride in to talk about hospice, he heard the word and he threatened to insert part of his foot in an anatomically incorrect orifice. But to him, even the word meant that he was giving up, that he had 6 months left before he takes the big bus ride. So is that still a word that triggers this kind of emotion in most people?
Absolutely. I think that the word hospice has such a stigma associated with it. I think people hear the word hospice and they think it means death. And I think one of our goals is really to educate people that it doesn't mean death. It just means, services that can really help with quality of life. So it's a way of helping to live more than helping to die.
I mean, you're talking about the last few months and having a life that is extended through the last few months. Isn't that what palliative care is all about?
Yes. It's making the time that you have, or any of us has, with a terminal illness, good quality of life. Who can have good quality if they're in pain, if they don't have an appetite, and also to know that there are physicians there and there's a team to support them through these times. Because I think the word talking about hospice, I think when patients hear hospice, they feel like maybe their team has given up on them.
Yes, they're being warehoused to die.
Yeah, right. Okay, we can't do anything else for you.
Right.
All right, you
We
go
bought
home
your
and
ticket somewhere on that long bus ride, and hopefully when I get there, I don't want suntan lotion and a beach towel. I don't want to be heading south at that point.
Right.
But, there's got to be something that says, okay, if I have, be it a day, a week, 6 months, a year, boy, I want to make the best out of every minute left.
And I think that's really what our aim is, and I think there's these bad emotions that go along with the word hospice, when in reality, there's actually studies that show that early palliative care, so early hospice type services, can actually improve survival or improve patients' quality of life, and also just, how they're living with the disease.
When you think of how many oncological agents are set up to extend life for 3 to 6 months, it's amazing. And you say, well, what's 3 to 6 months? Well, if I want to see my daughter graduate, You know, we had a good friend who had pancreatic cancer. And, I mean, the outcome was not predictably well. And her daughter was 2.5 years from graduating high school, and she just basically said, I'm going to see my daughter graduate. And it was amazing. We were all so happy. And then it's like 2 months afterwards, she passed. But her daughter got to see her mom at her graduation. Her mom got to see her daughter walk, you know, in her gown.
That's amazing.
And so when you sit there and say, what is 3 to 6 months?
Right.
I don't know that anybody that hasn't gone through it could really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I think that's another of the things that we really like to provide is figuring out what goals are. You know, not everyone's goals are the same, and sometimes it is making it to a big event. And we want to do everything that we can to help with that.
I got to ask you, why? Of all the branches of oncology, you know, you've got the one that the outcome, you know, I mean, okay, so I found out I have some type of cancer. Initially, I'm still hoping, you know, whether it be breast cancer and, hey, you caught it early enough, you know, any type of that nasty word. But you don't get those.
But even though we don't get those, we're still hoping with the patient that we'll get them to whatever milestone that they want in their life. Everybody's quality of life is different, and they, you know, some patients are okay sitting around all day, and that's okay with them, but others want to play golf every day, and that's important to them. So maybe you used to walk the course, but now you might have to take the golf cart. So I think every patient's different, and sometimes I ask myself, why do I do this? But I do it because I love the patient, and I love to see the patient do what they want in the time they have. It's very rewarding, I find, for myself.
Absolutely. I think there's just so much of an impact that we can make by really helping people just to enjoy the life that they have remaining.
Oh, no, I admire you for it. I don't know I could do it. You know,
Yeah, I think when you see the impact that you make on a person's life, I think that's when you realize that it's worthwhile.
And the relationships you develop with the patient, you become very involved in the patient's life. You know their family, you know what they like, what they don't like. And it's also getting them to a comfortable place with the family, because they might not have 3 to 6 months. And are they okay with that? Because that's a hard thing to swallow.
Now, that seems to go against everything we read about insurance companies. You know, that physicians get 13.8 minutes per patient. You know, move them up, move them out.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're spending a lot more than 13.8 minutes with a patient.
A lot more time.
A lot more time.
Whatever the patient needs.
Yep.
And the insurance covers it.
I don't even really know much about insurance. The patients ask me about the insurance, but I couldn't tell you what's covered.
Yeah.
And don't care so much.
That's a wonderful testament to the hospital. You know, Jeff Hopkins always said on ER, when they say, does the insurance affect how you treat? He said, once they get through that initial room, I'm agnostic.
Yep.
I have no idea.
Absolutely.
Right.
You know,
Absolutely.
you pick what's right for the patient.
Yep.
And that's what's great about this community and the hospital here. Very supportive of
Absolutely.
our program.
Yeah. You spend the time that it takes.
Yep.
And that the patient needs.
Right. Whatever they need.
Whatever they need.
So I've been diagnosed. You know, that big M word. The metastatic word comes in. I know that there's a bus ticket waiting for me. And there is probably a finite number of heartbeats I have left before I have to get on the big bus. I come to you, and what? What happens?
So it is a big team approach. So I would say there are a lot of people involved in that point. So there's us, the radiation oncology team, and then there's the medical oncology team. And then we all kind of talk about, first we have long conversations. We'd have a long conversation with you just about what the status of the disease is, where it is, And also a big thing is prognosis. So we'd have a big conversation just about prognosis and what it means for you.
Well, you ask, what do I want? I don't want to get on the bus.
Right.
Okay, so that's not an option.
Right.
You know, sorry, there's nothing, by the time I get to you, you can't cancel my bus ticket.
Right. But, you know, there are things that we can do, and that's why we would talk to the medical oncology team. You know, starting out, there's definitely treatments that we can offer, and while they won't cure things, they can potentially prolong or keep the cancer at bay, you know, for a period of time. And there's also a lot of things that we can do, as we were saying, just to help with symptoms. So where we come in on the radiation side point is we can give radiation to help with pain. So a lot of times when cancer becomes metastatic, it can cause a lot of pain, especially when it goes to places like the bone. And so we can give radiation to really help with that.
So now, when it goes to a bone, you're going to be, it almost feels like it's more a chemo approach than a radiation approach, isn't it?
It's both. So, you know, when it goes to the bone, I think there's sort of two different sides to the treatment. So the chemotherapy is something that can kind of get everywhere in the body, and so you give that to stop it spreading. But when there's pain in one specific site, you know, chemotherapy might not work as fast.
I always think of chemo as, okay, how do I balance killing the patient a little slower than killing the cancer?
Right.
You know, because when I think of the chemo agents, they're not nice little things.
But I think, too, that's something that we think about from a long time ago, where a lot of the chemotherapy agents made patients very sick. Again, you know, you hear the word chemotherapy, you think nausea and vomiting.
No hair.
Can't get out of bed, no hair. Many patients now getting chemotherapy don't always and work through treatment if they can.
Yep.
Amazingly.
Yep.
We have many patients that work on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely.
You know, sometimes at the end of their treatment when they're a little bit tired, you know, we kind of say maybe you want to back off a little bit, because some patients are in treatment for a long time between chemotherapy and radiation. It's been a long haul. It's like a second job for patients to come to the clinic. And that's really where it can get a little sticky.
You know, when I think of compliance and just quality of treatment, you know, when they told me my mother, she was 80 years old, had intestinal cancer, you go through all the stages, you know, and you realize there's nothing I can do. But for her, being treated in her little hospital, I know Ed is rolling over, it's not little anymore, but, you know, to my mother who's 92, it'll always be the little red Milford Hospital.
Yeah.
Frank used to yell at me when I called it that. That's what we grew up. You know, there was no Dana-Farber, it was the Little Red Hospital. You know, you had two entrances, the front and the visitors, the Portuguese visitors entrance. There was always a nice Portuguese grandmother that'd pry open a door and let all the other grandmothers flood in. Oh yeah, it was, I always tell the story, it was amazing, because they had these rules of only 2 people. And I used to laugh, because the poor floor nurse would have a heart attack when there's like a dozen. And they'd walk in and try and explain to them that only 2 people allowed, and everyone would no speak English. You know, people like my mother who've been here since she was 16 years old, all of a sudden forgot every English word. And, you know, I'd say something, and one of the grandmothers would look at me and say, "You say something, you die." It's like, you rat us out, and you die.
Yeah.
They're like, "Oh, okay.
Okay.
I know speaking English either." But, you know, it was amazing driving her, you know, and to her to see Dr. Mona. It wasn't Dr. Cadis, it was Dr. Mona. And, you know, 10 years later, she still goes to the same person.
Yeah.
You know, it made it so much easier, you know, versus packing her up in a car. Not just on her, but I'll be kind of self-centered and say, instead of packing her up in the car and driving an hour and a half to man's greatest hospital, right, to be able to drive 10 minutes, you know,
Yeah.
and see the same person. Because I'm sure that, you know, at Dana-Farber on Binney Street or whatever, she wouldn't have the same oncologist for 12 years. So, you know, it's amazing having those services here. What a difference.
And that's another portion of good quality of life, because again, if patients are uncomfortable in pain, who's going to be able to tolerate being in the car for an hour and a half back and forth?
I hadn't thought about that.
So that's the other piece where it's so much easier, you know, if you're 10 minutes away to come, because radiation is Monday through Friday. It's every day for so many treatments. And affordability, you know, we have good parking there. You know,
So true.
You always park in the Portuguese club lot and sneak across.
right.
There you go.
But again, the time that patients save is, again, I think a huge, makes a huge impact on patients' lives, because patients who have family that work, it's very difficult to get all the time a family member would really need to be off to take care of that person.
It almost becomes a full-time job.
This is a full-time job.
If you have to drive, you know, and what are you going to say? I'm not going to give up my sainted mother.
Right.
But on the other hand, if I have to give up my position to be able to drive her an hour and a half to Boston, an hour and a half back, 2 hours there, that's all day.
Right.
Unless I'm going to work at night, how the heck can I do that?
You're never going to sleep.
Right.
Yeah, which is true.
Right.
But, you know, having an income is a nice thing. The mortgage needs to be
Absolutely.
paid.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So they come to you, and you bring this team together. Now what happens?
So we bring the team together, and then we come up with a treatment plan. And, you know, a big part of what we do is that treatment plan isn't just the chemotherapy and the radiation. It's a lot more than that. So we involve social work, we involve nutrition, we involve chaplaincy. So we have all of these services that become a part of the treatment plan.
Oh, wow. So I'm not just walking in saying, Monica, medium well.
Right.
I don't want to be well done, just, you know.
Right. No, and that's really one of the things that we provide to people is we know that, you know, at that point, there's so many things that come into play as part of a treatment plan. And so it really becomes a team effort.
So now I come in, and if I am really suffering because of, you know, a bone cancer, you're going to nuke just the bone, or?
Yep. So when we do radiation, we would do it just to the area that's causing the pain.
And the idea is just to keep it at bay until you can't keep it at bay anymore.
Yeah, which can be for a long time, and we really can shrink things down and, you know, get rid of things just in that one area for a long period of time to just keep you pain-free for as long as possible.
I would imagine that some of the safeguards, the long-term exposure, you don't have to follow by the same guidelines.
So, you know, in terms of, so we don't actually give as much dose as you might for other types of cancer. So we don't worry as much about kind of longer-term things that might happen. And we can also do it in much shorter periods of time, so it's easier for patients.
And I guess if they're close enough, you can have them come in 5 days a week.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think.
Yeah.
If I had to go to Boston every day, again, somebody in my family's got to give up their job.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
You know, whereas if I can come in at 4 o'clock, I can work 3/4 of a day.
Yep.
And you can switch, you know, on and off.
We have a lot of patients that do that. Either they'll come in the morning, like at 7:15, right away, and then go to work. We'll have some that come at 4:30 after work.
Oncologists are working at 7:15 in the morning.
Absolutely.
We're there at 7 a.m.
Well, that's wonderful. Because, I mean, even something as mundane as grandma daycare, we have wonderful services, but it's 8 to 4. Now, again, you know, I drive to Woburn, just above the Arctic Circle every day.
Wow.
At 5:30, it's a 58-minute run.
Yeah.
Any other time or on the way home, it's an hour and a half to 2 hours. So there's no easy way of doing that every day and doing a job.
Right.
No, it's not feasible. And for many people, it's not, because people have to work.
Right.
So now I come in, you bring the team, and all these services. So most people, at home and coming in, or do you have people living at the hospital for these treatments?
We occasionally have people in the hospital, but most people are coming in from home.
So it's mainly outpatient?
Mainly outpatient.
Well, I mean, forget the cost. That's just mentally got to be so much nicer.
Yeah.
And that's the goal, to keep people home as long as possible.
Absolutely, and out of the hospital.
And that's really part of our, part of our service. That's why we have the whole team involved, is to keep patients at home. What can we do in the home to keep you there?
Mm-hmm.
So today you have most families that I know of, both spouses are working.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you keep them, now all of a sudden I've developed, a cancer, I'm going to be home, but if I can't take care of myself, what happens? I mean, what kind of services can you bring to help me in the house?
And that's where the palliative care services become so important. And so they can, what the palliative care services do is they will actually go into the home. It involves a visiting nurse that will go into the home and just assess what services are needed at home and how best to be able to take care of the patient.
Well, I mean, some of it is just, mom's got dementia.
Mm-hmm.
You can't leave her home alone.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do? I mean, a lot of people can't afford to put them in assisted living at $13,000.
Mm-hmm.
To have somebody come in during the day is still $5,000 a month. What options are there for people?
Well, I think that's the important part of involving social work.
Yes.
So when the patients come in to see us, they're automatically, a referral is made for them to see the social worker and also the nutritionist. And that way, the social worker knows what services are available in the area and what can be provided. Some places have a day program or people that will go out to the house and stay with people based on insurance, what things can be covered, like respite programs to help families. So I think every case is different. And I think that's why it's so important that we involve them right away.
Mm-hmm.
Because they know the ins and outs of what's available in the community, in the surrounding communities. Because not every patient's from Milford, but where are they from and what's around them and what will come to them.
Because I remember when we first looked at, when dementia set in, we were worried because we work.
Right, of course.
And you can't leave grandma. Now here's the woman who took care of the family. I mean, I'm married to a saint because when my dad passed away 28 years ago, my darling bride came home and said, you got to move your mother in with us. And I said, really? She goes, she'll be dead within a year. Portuguese grandmother, we were living in D.C. and Maryland. Having her here all by herself in a home, she wouldn't have lasted.
Yeah.
She moved in with us, looked at her granddaughter, and was like, target radar acquisition lock. Now all of a sudden, she has somebody that she can dedicate herself to again. And here we are 28 years later, and now she can't be left alone.
Yeah.
And it's really tough because you start finding out that she's making too much money to get aid. And it's like, excuse me? She gets her Social Security plus 2 little $300 pensions, which put her at $2,300 a month.
Oh.
And the most you can make is $2,150, or you don't qualify.
Wow.
So the first question is, okay, all I want is somebody to help us during the day.
Right.
Right.
Well, that's $5,000 a month.
Oh, wow.
Plus. And you sit there and say, realistically, it isn't easy to have $60,000 of disposable income that you can dedicate.
Right.
So that's why I ask, how do these people get by? Because when you look at $2,300 a month, that it's money, but it doesn't seem like, she's wealthy and out there buying Rolls Royces on $2,300 a month.
Right.
Now luckily she has no expenses because she lives with us. But how do most people deal with that? Can they get help from the state?
I don't know exactly how. I'm very ignorant when it comes to insurance. I can't.
Yeah.
Thank God.
Yeah, I think it makes my job so much easier that I don't even think about it.
Yeah.
But I think that there are a lot of programs in the community, but I just think it's finding out about them.
Yes.
And there are a lot of things offered, day programs for people, people to come in, but I think the hard part is navigating to it.
And that's where our social workers are so important, and they
Right.
really know all these services and
Well,
can
things
help our
like the
patients.
nutritionist that you bring up,
Yeah,
getting my mother to eat.
yeah.
It's
huge.
amazing that, and here's a woman, I'll take her out, and if I buy her a burger at a restaurant, well, you know, the old Depression era mentality, I'm not wasting food. So she'll eat a whole quarter pounder without even blinking. But at home, try and get her to eat breakfast. You know, so again, I mean, luckily my darling bride went out and found these protein drinks. It adds 400 calories and
Yep.
Yep, and lots of energy.
lots of energy, and
Absolutely.
you
Yep.
know, off you go. So I would imagine that the nutritionists, I mean, for somebody like me, it's very simple. You fat old man, you lose weight, you eat too much, you're eating too many calories. Okay, I can understand that.
Yeah.
But to try and determine what is viable for some of these patients.
And that's why the dietitian, when they talk about nutrition, is important, because patients think they're eating well, but many times in the oncology population, these patients, for many reasons, have lost appetite.
Yep.
Things that were appealing to them are no longer appealing. So it's trying to find, okay, what are you going to eat? What do you want to eat? How much of it to get enough calories in? Everybody worries because their BMI is too high. Now we want their BMI up
Right.
to be
Right.
normal. Because a lot of times they've come in and they've lost some weight prior to diagnosis. And sometimes with the diagnosis, they
Well, I
just don't
mean,
feel like eating.
You're absolutely right. Your whole life you worry about being bovine-esque, right? That, okay,
Right.
Got to be on a diet.
everything,
Right.
no
Gotta-
matter, God, I mean, I don't understand. But, you know, no matter what your figure is, oh, you're too big.
Right.
It's like, you got to be kidding me.
Right.
You know, and I hate to be sexist, but old men seem to take being rotund a little better.
Yeah.
You know, my
that's
darling
true.
bride is the most beautiful, intelligent person I've ever seen, and still will be after 100 years of marriage. Try and convince her. You know, no.
Right.
You know, you just say that. Okay, if I didn't believe it, would I really say it? You know,
Right.
and you just got to get over it.
Right.
Because, no, I will never be impartial when I look at my best friend for, you know, the last 100 years, the woman who brought my daughters in, the woman who has built my family and been there as our foundation. Now you turn the tables and you say, no, bulk up.
Right.
Eat that ice cream.
That I know.
What's that stupid shake I make every morning for my mother? It's got like 9 billion calories in
Right.
this little...
And that's a big thing
And
too. Shakes and
That's so important.
yeah. A lot of our patients have tough time swallowing anything or eating regular
Well, the
solid
other thing
foods.
is, it's not like you're helping me when I leave. Okay, I walk into your microwave, you zap me. When I walk out, it's not like my appetite all of a sudden, oh, I feel great.
Right.
You know, I'll ignore this nausea. Bring me on some heavy, greasy food.
Right.
That's what we want you to feel like.
I
but it
know.
doesn't
We
work
would love it if
way.
that happened.
But, and two, I mean, I think patients also with chemo have had an aversion sometimes to food because of smells.
Taste. Taste
So
is a big one.
And that's why we do a lot of talking and
Yeah.
saying, trying to coax them that, like, okay, you need to get over that and just try it. 'Cause they're afraid things are going to make them nauseous, or sometimes taste is lost for a while during treatment. And things don't taste like they used to. That burger tastes like cardboard now.
Well, and I think sometimes, too, I remember when they found a cyst on, with men, I hate to be sexist again, but we don't worry, out it comes, right? There was no worry that, you know, the breast tissue, and out. Well, it was so good the first time. And I ate just bread and very mild. And I threw up. So when they found one on this side, my darling bride almost killed me. She says, what are you doing? I said, I'm eating Szechuan. She goes, they told you? I said, yeah. These are the same people who told me bread and mild, and I threw up anyway, so I'm going to enjoy it.
there you go.
You know, so I could see people getting to a point of saying, this is a futile effort. Whatever I eat, I'm not going to hold down anyway. So why do I want to eat just to make myself throw up? So it's got to be hard.
Mm-hmm. It's hard, but that's why this team approach is helpful. We really get to know the patients. So when that patient walks in the door, I know what he's probably or she's probably had for breakfast, and I know it's not enough. Gotta eat. So sometimes I feel like a cheerleader. And cheering the patients on.
That's a lot.
And really supporting them and trying to help them get through. And it's just really rewarding. After the patients finish treatment, we'll see them a month after that. They're maybe feeling better and eating better and have put on 5 pounds. Like that's
so wonderful to see.
Right.
So wonderful to see.
So now, what options? I mean, our favorite farmer, Peter Oreo, plants his seeds. I don't think you liked it when I said, so you studied half your life to be a farmer, to just go and plant seeds? He goes, well, I think it's more than that. I said, no, it sounds like brachytherapy is you're planting seeds. You know, but you go through and you say, okay, the shape of the treatment, you know, it's amazing how far radiation therapy has come. What options do you face? I mean, when you're looking, saying, okay, where does it hurt? Okay. You said bone is probably the biggest?
Bone is, yep, probably the biggest area of pain. But we also treat things like brain. So if it's gone to the brain, we'll treat that. Lung.
You're zorching my brain?
We do if you have cancer in your brain, that can be really bad. Can cause a lot of problems. And so we do treat the brain so that we can stop that from killing people.
How, if a cancer is inside inside the brain, how do I get to the bad tissue without going through the good tissue?
Right, and that's a huge problem. So So there's actually a bunch of different ways that we can treat the brain, and one of which is actually a much more advanced technique, where if someone just has a couple of spots in the brain, we can treat it just with very focused radiation just to those 2 spots. But when someone has more than that, we have to treat the whole brain. So we do get some of the normal brain when we treat with the radiation.
The growth, if it's on the surface, I can see where, okay, I'll just not go very deep and really limit it. But are most tumors on the surface?
No.
So it's inside
the brain.
Parts of my brain that I really would rather not have you messing with.
Right. The dose that we give is typically, not high enough to cause significant damage to the brain. We do cause side effects. There's, of course, side effects. So you're back to the same as the chemo people. You're trying to kill the cancer a little faster than you're killing my brain tissue. Right.
Because you got to go through good tissue.
We have to go through good tissue.
I can see if it's kidney or whatever, if you had to, you open it up and side view or whatever, but I don't think you're going to really open the brain up.
So when we do that very focused radiation, we can sort of go through normal brain tissue without getting too much radiation to that normal tissue and just get right to the tumor itself. So you get a little bit of radiation, but...
Now, wait a minute. Okay. I'm the little bad guy in here.
Right.
You're going through here. How do you teach the E-beam or whatever to say good tissue, bad tissue?
Right. So what we do, when we do that very focused radiation, we basically, so we'll get a CAT scan of your brain, which we use for our treatment. We also have an MRI of the brain that you would have had done before the CAT scan, and we can put them together. And then we come in from several different areas of the brain. So several different radiation beams coming in from different areas. And where they meet up is where the tumor is. So you have a little bit of dose coming here, a little bit of dose coming here.
So it's a cumulative
a little
effect.
bit coming here. Yep.
It's
and
not
then you just have a little bit going to all the areas around the tumor, but all of it meets up and adds up in the middle, and that's where you get all of the radiation.
Okay, that makes more sense to me, because I'm just trying to figure out how you tell a directed beam to skip. Kind of, I want you to jump, but you're not. You're going very low dose, many areas, and the convergence
Exactly.
is what now hits the bad tissue.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's got to be scary.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you think of the old movies of lobotomies and what, you know, happened to patients. But today, that's not really an issue, is it?
No, I mean, not to that extent, of course. But, you know, with some, again, sometimes when there's a lot of different areas of cancer in the brain, we do end up treating a lot of the brain. But typically, it's a low enough amount of radiation that gets to the brain that it doesn't cause major issues. It is a conversation with every patient, though, about whether it's worth it and whether the treatment is worth doing. And I think that's another part where our service really comes into play.
That's where I need your expertise.
Right.
Because you sit there and say, okay, I've got 3 months till I get on the bus. If I try this, I could have 6 or 8. But if I've progressed to a point where you're going to have to really, medium isn't set up, it's going to be well done.
Right.
And I won't be cognizant of what's going around. That's got to be the most personal decision where you say, well, I want 3 months of clarity versus 6 or 7 months where the last 4 or 5, I have no idea.
Right. I think that's where these discussions really come into play, where we really try to figure out, you know, what does this patient want? What is this patient's goals? And are those in line with the treatment that we're going to offer?
But are most of the cancers located in a place that doesn't affect your mind?
So I would say that typically in the brain, it really depends. But when they're there, most of the time, you know, if they're big enough, they are going to cause some issues.
If it's spread enough in my brain,
yeah,
there is no good outcome.
Right.
I mean, there's no good outcome anyway, but that one I can understand. But
Right.
of the 10 patients that you have, how many have metastasized in the brain?
Probably just, you know, I would say 1 or 2 of the 10.
Okay, so of the other 8, where's the next most favorite watering hole for tumors?
The bone. I would say that's probably the most.
But when you say the bone, I have
Or
a bone there, I have a bone
bones.
here. I have lots of bones.
Bones in general, yeah. So arms, legs, spine.
And that's what I'm trying to get an idea. Is it legs? Because, okay, if you take away my ability to walk, I'm not real happy. But,
Right.
hey, wheelchairs are wheelchairs. I can
Right.
still see my grandkids.
But that's where radiation comes in. So you have pain in your hip, you can't walk. So what do? You come in, you get some radiation, and guess what? Maybe you can get out of that wheelchair
Yep.
and walk. And that, you know, back pain, you know, sometimes the lower back can be really sore, radiating to the hip, radiating to the leg. And it's debilitating for people.
Yep.
But that's why the service is important, because you come in and then we're continuing to follow up. So if it goes to another area in your body, we can help with that. And we know the patient because we've taken care of them before.
But now, when it locates in that bone, is that something that happens, or by that time is it all over the bones?
No, it can just be in one spot.
So I could
In
be
this bone.
fortunate that you could just, in the worst case, and again, this is not optimal, but if door number 1 is the bus ride, anything besides, you know, door number 1,
Right.
you know, okay, I can't walk or I can't use my right leg, but I don't have to take that bus ride right now. Good. I can live, at least for a longer time.
Right.
But now, if it gets into the bone, you know, I always wonder, is it a surface tumor or is it in the marrow or?
So typically not surface. So it typically is sort of into the kind of the chunk of the bone.
So
The
you're
meat
not
of the bone.
calling in the, bring your knife, Mr. Surgeon.
Right. There are some areas where we would call in a surgeon, you know, especially for areas that might bear a lot of weight, where, you know, any kind of cancer in the bone can really eat away at the bone and can break the bone. So then we might call a surgeon in and say, can you, you know, put a rod in or do something to just stabilize it so that it doesn't break.
That. I had a rod playing hockey where I broke off my leg.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. And next thing I know, they put a rod in and screwed it all together. And then I said, why does that rod have threads? They said, how do you think it comes out? I was like, I don't want to know.
Keep it there.
Yeah.
Keep it there, right.
No. They said at that point I was only 30-some years old. And they said, no. You know, the bone will atrophy if that rod stays in and becomes a weight-bearing structure. I said, I don't want to think about it. It's a happy leg now. It's all screwed in. And then they called me and said, okay, we're repossessing your rod and screws. And I said, no, I don't want to give them up. I've grown attached to them. So I hadn't thought about that, but you could really help me out by, even if I can't strengthen the bone, I guess eating chunks of calcium wouldn't help at that point.
Not really, no.
Now, the bone, then you think of the organs.
Yeah.
You know, when I think of pancreatic, to me that is immediately a shudder.
Yeah.
I mean, is that still the worst?
So pancreatic cancer is one of the bad ones. It's one of the bad ones.
I mean, we were working on artificial tracheas and esophagus because, you know, the outcome was 15% over 5 years survived past the 5-year mark. You know, and you really can't live too easily without a trachea, and especially without an esophagus.
Right.
You know, so there, I guess, you just zorch it and try and keep it as far under control as you can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You kind of give it everything that you have.
Now, people hear you say you're going to scan my cat. Well, my cat runs around fast, so you're going to have to catch him. But when you hear a CAT scan versus a PET scan versus an MRI, why do I need all these things? Once you scan my cat, aren't I happy?
Not always.
No.
I'm happy, the cat's not.
Cat's not happy.
But you know, people a lot don't understand the terms why. Which role, you know, does the magnetic, let me ask you, explain it.
And they all do different things. So a CAT scan is kind of a good first scan to do, and it can look at the bones very well. It can look at the lungs. It can look at things just to get a general picture of what things look like. It's not very good at looking at the brain.
So I'm laying down. I'm in that stupid tube with headphones on, hopefully so I don't move. And they yell at you if you fall asleep, I learned. They don't want you. I said, I thought that would be good. I don't move.
I won't bother you.
Yes, no. So CAT scan is really just an overall.
Yeah, so and it's open. So that's one thing that patients always ask, because a lot of times, you know, people can get claustrophobic, and so they always want to know.
Why?
You know.
You're putting me in a little tube for what, 40 minutes?
Right, and so a CAT scan is not a little tube. It's more open, and so it's easier for people to go through.
But you're basically just slicing.
Yep, it's like slicing a loaf of bread. We're basically taking a slice of you throughout your body. It's a good way of looking at your stomach, at looking the organs in your stomach, looking at your lungs, kind of getting a general sense of what things are and, you know, what things might be abnormal. An MRI can take a closer look at some of the soft tissues, so it's good at looking at the brain, looking for cancer in the brain. It's good at kind of taking a closer look at some of those organs.
So the basic science behind a CAT scan is?
So basically using x-rays.
It's like taking a gazillion x-rays.
Yep, from different angles.
And you're slicing up, you're taking pictures from bottom up by slice.
Yep.
Should I be worried that you're taking a gazillion x-rays of me?
So you are getting some radiation from that. So you are getting some radiation exposure. You know, what I would say is when you have cancer, I would say that the risk of that radiation exposure is significantly lower than the risk
door
of the
number one
cancer
looms,
itself.
door
Yes.
number one looms too close.
Yes.
So getting a little extra, getting fried a little bit more, I can live with.
Yes. And that's what I
So,
would
okay,
say.
I'm not going to just do x-rays. Now you want to take a magnet and shake up my molecules.
Right. And so this is the tube, and this is the one where claustrophobia becomes important. So we can give people medicine beforehand if we know that they're claustrophobic, but you'll go into a tube, and this is where they use the magnet to kind of take better pictures of, you know, it's really good at, again, looking at the brain, looking at
Soft tissue.
Soft tissue, exactly. Looking at soft tissue.
Now, is it the same slicing idea, or is it more localized?
It's the same kind of slicing idea.
But I'm being hit with a magnet, not x-rays.
Yep.
Why wouldn't I go to the MRI right away?
So the MRI, again, it's a tougher test for people. It is more.
Because I'm in the stupid tube
You're
for
in
a
the
half hour or
tube,
so.
and it's really hard for a lot of people to tolerate.
So I close my eyes and try to put myself to sleep.
Right.
And then they
And
yell
they
at
tell
me.
you not to, right?
They said, don't sleep. How do
Stay
you know?
awake.
It's the
Exactly.
snoring that gives you away. Okay.
Right. Right.
Okay, so you've scanned my cat, you've hit me with a magnet, and then they say, okay, you have any other pets? Because we're going to scan the pet.
Right.
What is a PET scan?
So a PET scan is something we do when we want to really get a sense of where the cancer is. So what a PET scan does is it lights up. So it lights up wherever there are cells that are eating a lot of sugar. Cancer likes to eat a lot of sugar fast. Basically places where it's metabolizing really fast. And so it'll light up wherever there's cancer.
So that's the reason that I nail your hair, your stem cells. I'm going after very fast metabolizing cells, which can be either stem cells or cancer.
Right. Exactly. And so it'll light up in areas where there's cancer. So it's the best way that we have of really identifying where cancer is in your body.
So why don't I admit I have a cat or a pet, and I don't have to have my cat scanned, and I don't have to be hit with a magnet. I go right to a PET scan.
So we don't like to, so what would happen, so you would go into the hospital with, you know, certain symptoms, and you wouldn't necessarily have a diagnosis of cancer yet. So at that point, they would do a CAT scan just to kind of get a sense of what's going on. They wouldn't do a PET scan if they don't know that you have
Why?
cancer already. Because again, it's an additional test, and we try not to do more tests that are necessary.
Why wouldn't you just do away with the CAT scan, the MRI, and just, if the PET scan is the
Right.
definitive, why don't I just go to that?
Because someone coming into the hospital with symptoms might not have cancer, and a PET scan isn't the best thing for looking at things other than cancer.
Okay.
So, you know, you come into the hospital with stomach pain, we
So
can't.
it's a general screening technique.
Right.
On comes the cat.
On comes the cat, exactly.
See, now it makes sense. 'Cause,
Which
you know,
may show you tumor size.
Exactly.
The PET scan's not always going to show you the tumor size. It just might light up in
Right.
that area that it's there.
Exactly.
So sometimes you do the PET scan. So, okay, we know a patient has lung cancer. We've seen the CAT scan. We do the PET scan because we're getting ready to give the patient some chemo because we think it's just in their lung. Do the PET scan. Oh, wait a minute. There's a spot in the hip. That changes the game plan because things need to be rethought out.
Right.
Because every patient who has a diagnosis, we have a kind of plan, a set strategy for everybody. So we need to have the full data, and the PET gives you the full data, but not always necessary.
Right.
But you're saying that the PET scan doesn't necessarily give you the screening that the CAT scan does.
So it doesn't, so it's not the best first test.
Right.
It's not the best first thing to do. Again, as Patty said, it's a good way to kind of look at the whole body and see where there might be cancer.
That makes more sense, because
Yeah.
obviously when I hear, CAT, MRI, PET, I sit there and say, okay, cut out the middleman.
Right.
Let's just do the
Just
PET,
do the PETs.
unless they're saying, wait a minute, the PET scan is so much more expensive that your insurance company won't.
And that's part of it.
Okay.
That's
so there is the downside.
Definitely part of
Of
it.
cost for MRI
that-
and PET are much more
And
than
it's
a CAT
insurance
scan.
companies won't approve the PET scan unless
Without
you
the
have a
scan.
diagnosis of
It's
cancer.
like so many of these treatments that you got to do
Right.
the scanning. And then if it is, you can do the further tests.
Right.
Because some patients just start with initial x-rays. So you go in and have a cough, you have a
Right.
chest
Get an
x-ray.
X-ray.
Oh, wait a minute.
Right.
We didn't think it was anything. We see a spot.
And then
you progress
escalate.
from there.
Right.
And that is a scary movie, when you have pneumonia and they see a spot.
Oh, absolutely.
I lived through that last year, and it's the most sobering experience where no matter what your primary care physician says to you, as he's explaining it, I'm like, I know what that means. He says,
Right.
yeah, but you don't.
Right.
It could be the pneumonia.
Right.
Wait 10 days. Oh, Lord, yes. Not a problem. I'm just not going to think about it. That,
Right.
you know, I happened to have a trip to England as I realized this could be my last trip overseas, and this could be my last, and you know what I mean? It's like, oh my God, I don't want to waste 7 days away from my kids.
Right.
And then when it comes back and says, it was just a spot from the pneumonia, it's like, thank you.
You can breathe again.
Thank you. Yeah.
I mean, it was like a 100-pound weight off my back.
Terrifying, right?
You know,
I
and you
know.
sit there and say, my Lord,
I know.
you know, could it be anything more scary?
Right.
You know?
Right.
So that makes more sense, because you hear about all these treatments, and you say, maybe it's just an insurance thing.
Right.
And if it's just an insurance thing, you know, maybe I can put a couple shekels together and scan my pet, leave my cat alone. But it really is a logical progression that you have to go
Absolutely.
through.
Absolutely.
Sometimes the progression's hard because waiting to have that next test, waiting for that next test result.
Right. It just feels like
So
so much
long.
and so much
Okay,
waiting.
I've done the CAT scan, and you say, we'd really like to do an MRI. Ruh-roh.
Right. Right.
If you found nothing on the CAT scan, you would tell me, life is good, go home.
Right.
The fact that you're, okay, we've done the MRI, now we want to do a PET scan, you know,
Right.
double ruh-roh. You know, the odor of rodent is in the air. I smell a
Right.
rat. You know, there's something that is there that I don't want to think about. So now I go through the treatments. Do you carry it out to the final stage? I mean, when do you have to sit there and say, there's nothing more we can nuke?
So I think that's a big part of what we do and one of the hardest parts of what we do. And I think that's really done by having conversations with patients, forming relationships with them and getting to know them and know what they want. I think we along with our medical oncology colleagues really talk through what a patient's goals are and what we can do and when is the treatment more harmful than the cancer. When are we doing more
Yeah.
harm than good?
It's got to be hard when I look and say, but don't give up on me.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
what we say is we're not. So even if we say we're not going to do any more chemotherapy, we're not going to do any more radiation, we're going to talk about supportive care, quality of life, we're still there. And we're working
yeah,
on
but at
ways
that point,
to
I
help.
know you bought my bus ticket.
Yeah.
At that point, when you tell me chemo, no, radiation, no, you can sugarcoat it any way you want, but God bless you for being able to look at somebody
Yeah.
and being able to say, we've done as much as we can. Although, you know, intuitively, when I go to visit you, I know it's a spiral, and it's not leading to any good place. You know, it's like people who get diagnosed with MS. You can slow the spiral, but you know there's not a happy place at the very end. You know, except, you know, you get to a point where my father-in-law now can breathe again. He can walk around again. And someday we'll catch up and we'll get to experience his grumpy old nature.
Right.
You know, and that's where I guess your faith just has to come in. That you say thank you to people like you, you know, or the bedside compassionate care people. When they know there are a few days left and they're not going to leave people alone.
Right.
And God bless them. You know, I can't imagine something harder than knowing you're sitting there and, you know, there's hours left or days and you're just making sure that people without a family or no support network aren't alone as they board the bus. As you get to my age, that becomes a lot closer than this. So as we come to an end, what would you say to people? You know, when they say, what can we do as a family? Because that's going to be the hardest thing. How do you react? Do they talk to you? Do they talk to the social care? I mean, I want to be supportive, but how do I be supportive in a positive way?
And I think, you know, I think that is one of the hardest things for families is how do we help this person that we care about so much? And I think, you know, talking to us, talking to social work, talking to the patient, and just all of us talking together. I think one of the things we like to do is have family meetings so that everyone is meeting together, and so we can really help figure out. I think every person is different in what they need, even from their family.
Just if it happens to me, I can deal, but I just can't imagine not being able to do anything.
Yeah.
You know, my daughter had chicken pox. She felt bad. She curled up under my arm. Of course, my darling bride comes home and says, "Are you on narcotics? You don't know if you've ever had them." Do you know? I said, "I know what it means. Don't talk to me."
Yeah.
Turns out I was one of those people, like my youngest daughter, who had 2 pox.
Oh.
So I had it. I just never knew.
Yeah.
But it was that feeling of helplessness.
Yeah.
You know, that here's the people, you know, my sainted mother, my darling bride. I am what I am, good, bad, or indifferent, but old, because of them.
Yeah.
And not being able to do something,
Yeah.
you know, my hat's off to you. Thank you for taking care of our families and for being there when they really do need the help. Amazing. As always, I am thoroughly amazed at the services. As you can see, the passion, the dedication of the staff, and the technology available. Here at the center of the universe, you can feel comfortable that there's no treatment that you're giving up. There's no care that you're not getting just because you're in Milford. So again, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
as always, to our 6 loyal viewers, I hope you never meet them anywhere but at Dairy Queen.
Right.
That's good.
But
Yeah, that sounds good.
may God bless. May tomorrow be a healthier day than today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Not too long since I've been home. Been running all my life